Welcome, dear participants of the Innovation at Amazon Online Hackathon. Um, we get this question, how to innovate like Amazon, quite a bit here at Amazon. And we thought that it would be good to share our culture of innovation that we have actually established to facilitate innovation across the whole company, but also dive a bit deeper into working backwards, which is our unique innovation methodology that drives many of the products and services that you know from us. But a little disclaimer before we actually start. This is our way. It is just one way. There are, of course, many ways of driving innovation. So don't take that as a silver bullet. This is just our way. It works for us and it may also work for you. A few words about myself. My name is Lars Schmitz. I'm based out of Munich and I'm a good 2 years now with Amazon Web Services. I'm a digital innovation lead and my focus is on driving innovation across public sector. The one thing that really drives me is actually driving impact and help to tackle the societal challenges that we are all facing. And I'm not only talking about COVID here, it's actually manifold. My previous working experience includes product development. I started as a software engineer, actually, then climbed up the ladder, became a software architect, designed, for example, flood early warning systems. Then turned to program management. I headed a startup program for a few years, and then finally turned to AWS to fill in the role that I'm having today. So first part will be to talk about our Amazon culture of innovation. We will have a little break in between before we actually dive a bit deeper into working backwards. Our mission at Amazon is to be the Earth's most customer-centric company. And yes, this is super broad. It is not focusing down on specific industries or regions or technologies. It doesn't talk about selling books. It is just very generally trying to make customers happy and satisfied. Now, while this is super broad, it's also very specific because it actually helps us to drive many of the decisions that we have to take in our company day in, day out. Is a decision for a product, is a product feature, is a service actually something that drives the benefit for the customer, or is it not? And like this mission actually helps us to take many of the decisions we take. Now, innovation for us generally starts with the customer, and from the customer's needs, we work backwards. We don't just innovate on because we like technology. We don't drive the innovation of business models. We don't copy paste what competitors are doing. We actually put the customer and his needs in the center of our focus. There are of course many ways to driving innovation. For us, the starting point is really the customer. Now, why is that? Why is the customer so important to us? Here you see a quote from Jeff Bezos in which he stated that there are many advantages of actually following that approach, but the one big point here is that customers are always beautifully, wonderfully dissatisfied. So what you can do is you can actually dive deep, relate with your customers, and then try to understand what his needs are, what his wishes are, what his pains eventually are, and try to tackle solutions. And this is actually twofold. On the one side, you can of course talk to your customers, and you should clearly talk to your customers. But it's not only about explicitly having the customer articulate his needs or desires. It is also more that you have to invent on behalf of the customer. So what it means is that you have to read in between the lines and try to find out what really drives the customer and what makes him happy. And this is actually, if you do that, that opens up a complete broad area of ideas, which ultimately may result in new products and solutions. This is a short roadmap of our history. You see that we were founded as Amazon.com in 1994. We launched the retail business as you know it today. In 1995, we started actually selling scientific books out of Seattle. And then that business scaled up over time. In 1998, we started to sell CDs and DVDs, which at that time were still super important. Then in 2006, we launched AWS, which of course is related to the other businesses. And I will get back to that point in a bit. We had Kindle. We then started to launch our own video production and video streaming business. We had groceries in 2012, Alexa, bookstores, Go, you name it. Now you may ask why these businesses seem to be super unrelated. Why is that? Well, actually, the answer you should know by now. It's simply because these businesses are all going back to ideas that have been identified by working backwards from our customers. So as you can see, just working backwards opens up a lot of opportunities for you. Vice versa, if you don't work backwards, you actually take the risk that you develop a product that nobody will actually like. That's the so-called product market fit that startups often talk about. Now, having an idea is one thing, but actually driving that within a company, especially in a large organization like Amazon, that's a completely different story. So a useful and supporting culture of innovation is actually super important. What you see here are the 4 pillars of our culture of innovation, and they are the culture itself. For example, the customer obsession that we live day in, day out. Then the organization. In today's world, it's all about the people, so you really have to take care of your people and empower them. It's also about IT, but that is just one thing. It's the architecture that supports the innovation, and it's in a way it's also the mechanisms in which you facilitate and drive ideas within the company. So let's start with the culture here. Jeff Bezos said that we had 3 big ideas at Amazon that we have stuck to for 20 plus years, and that are put the customer first, invent, and be patient. These key ideas are still around the whole company, and over time we have developed something that we call the leadership principles. And that means that we actually expect all of our employees to live up to these leadership principles. Right? They're kind of the DNA that we have across the whole company. And if a new colleague is actually entering the company, he is already facing these leadership principles because he has experienced them during the interview process. He will have answered questions like, so tell us about a story where you had to take a step back and where you dive deep to really understand the problem. That's one of our leadership principles. Or where you had to take a quick decision. How did you do that? That might be bias for action. Talking of which bias for action, that is, I think, relatively clear for all of us, and it's just one example that I want to point out here, given the time that we have. Speed, of course, matters in business today, and many decisions and actions that we have to be taken quickly, just because the problems are pressing, or because as a commercial company you want to maintain a competitive advantage. Now, if you carefully think about problems and decisions today, we tend to just think, hey, I need to do a super serious job. I need to collect as many data as any possible, and in order to be able to take a good and right decision. And that of course is true. But the question is, when do you actually have enough information, and can you eventually take calculated risks? And that brings us to an idea that we call one-way or two-way doors, and that is used across the company very, very often. And what does that mean? Now, in the analogy of a door, you open a door, you go through the door, and then either the door closes behind you so that you cannot go back, or it remains open so that you can go back. And that is the idea of irreversible or reversible decisions that you have to take. And that is a decision that you should, that is a thought, sorry. It's a thought that you should think about when taking a decision. Of course, there are many decisions that are irreversible. Just think about having to build up a new data center. You have to hire people. You have to invest a lot of money into the hardware. You have to sign contracts with the landlords and so forth. That is, of course, clearly a one-way decision. So you better take a lot of time really collecting data and driving consensus before taking that decision and signing the contracts and going ahead. But many decisions that we take today are actually two-way doors. Think about the feature in a web application. This is something that is relatively easy to test out. And if you feel that this doesn't work, that the experiment failed, in that case, you actually can just go back through your door, redesign your idea, and test out something different to improve the overall customer experience. Now, in these situations where you actually are dealing with a two-way door, where you have to take a reversible decision, we encourage to take that decision quicker, with calculated risk, and we actually encourage our leaders, and everybody at Amazon is a leader finally, to take that decision based on 80% of the information that he might want to have before he wants to take the decision, because simply he can go back. Organization. It's all about people, of course. And there's one thing at Amazon that really that I can clearly confirm from my own perspective. Amazon hires builders and lets them build. Now, what does that mean? We try to actually empower everybody at Amazon to drive his ideas, to drive his part of the business, and we also empower these people. So we give them the necessary tools and mechanisms to drive that business. Typically, people work not alone, but in teams, and that's another part of our organization. We talk about two pizza teams, and I personally don't really like that term, but in a way, it also makes a lot of sense. What is a two pizza team? I mean, you could argue whether you can feed 5 or 6 or 8 people with 2 pizzas, but basically what we are saying here is don't have a huge team, don't have a team of 20 or 30 people, because that is simply not efficient anymore, right? Instead, have a smaller team of maybe 4, 5, 6, maybe 8, but that is really the maximum. This is simply based on experience, and I think the people who are familiar with agile methodologies like Scrum will know that. If you are a relatively small team, you still remain agile. It's clear who does what, the responsibilities have been discussed, and it's easy to simply connect spontaneously to each other and just work in a very efficient way. Now, if you grow your team, you will see much more waste of energy for communication, for misunderstanding, and so forth. So what we are saying here is foster ownership and autonomy of small teams. And at Amazon, you will find teams that are just responsible for one feature, for example, and that will really own that feature from the beginning, from the ideation over the creation of the feature, but also the maintenance. So they really are responsible for the whole life cycle of that feature, and that makes a big difference because they feel ownership, and they all of a sudden just don't get a bug report, for example, and have to fix a bug. That doesn't really make you feel proud or make you feel own that feature. It's really that it is your baby in a way, and that you are responsible for the whole life cycle. Now, another aspect that we really encourage in our company is to experiment early and frequently. That goes a bit back to taking calculated risks. these days, it's really about testing things out, and it's super easy, right? The costs for developing new features in the IT world are relatively low thanks to cloud computing. So why not simply run an experiment, maybe with a limited group of end users, of course, maybe in a separate environment and not in your productive environment, maybe yes, but ultimately, why don't you just go ahead, develop a feature, develop a new feature service as a prototype, as a pilot, test this out, and just have quick learnings. That's the point of experimenting early. If you find out that your idea doesn't work, then hey, it was a try. You dump it, or you redesign it, and then you run your next experiment. But just by running quick experiments, and often you have the learnings that are so important. You couple back your ideas to the end users and how they actually perceive and like your idea, so that you can ultimately stay very close and mature your product and make it better and better over time. It's also that if you find out that your experiment is successful, then thanks to that learning, you can scale up that idea and you can roll it out, maybe to the whole country or maybe to the whole world, right? Now, experiments confirm and reject hypotheses. This is the history of Kindle, our ebook reader. As you can see, we started in 2007. You see the first device, Kindle device on the left side, and then new generations on the right side of that wall. If you look at the Kindle on the left side, you will see a rather clumsy, old school device. Is this bad or is this good? We think it's actually good because it helps us confirm hypotheses. And if we had an interactive session here, I would just ask you, what do you think what the underlying hypothesis of Kindle was? But just to answer that question myself, the underlying hypothesis was, at that time, hey, we have a bookstore, we sell books, but despite the best delivery service, it still took 1 or 2 days it still takes 1 or 2 days to actually order a book, ship the book, and start reading, right? So we thought about a way to actually improve that and shorten the time to something like 60 seconds. And that was the underlying hypothesis of Kindle. Is it possible to actually have a means to look for a book, to search a book online, to find out if you like it, and then say, okay, I like that book, I want to start reading, and then a minute later you can start reading. And that is exactly what the first device of Kindle did already. And then, of course, over time, the Kindle improved gradually. Better display. You could all of a sudden read in bright sunshine. You could these days you can actually run on battery without recharging for weeks. Actually, you can store hundreds or even thousands of books on your device today, but that is rather incremental improvements. The key hypothesis of Kindle was already confirmed through an experiment in 2007. Let's change gears once again. Now let's briefly discuss architecture, and I hope I'm not going to disappoint you. This is not a technology lecture. This is more about what architecture means, how modern architecture allows the AWS cloud infrastructure can actually facilitate a culture of innovation. Most of you, at least the software developers, are familiar with the concept of microservices, right? A microservice, what is it? It is a service that does one thing very good, that serves one purpose, one single purpose very good. The service accepts input. Think, for example, about the login on a website. It accepts the username and his password, and then it does the business logic in the back it authenticates the user, and it gives an answer back and says, okay, you're good to go. You can log into your website and check your shopping cart or start your shopping experience. Or no, sorry, I don't know you. You're not known to me, so I won't grant you access. That is all it does. Two simple inputs, one or two very basic outputs. Now, a microservice is something that exposes this functionality through an API, right? So it's clear how to use this service and how to make use of the authentication, the business logic that it provides. And to a large extent, to the outside world, so to say, this business logic is simply a black box, right? The only thing that other services or human users know is that how to call this service and what answer to expect. This is it. So and this is a super powerful approach, because it actually means divide and conquer. You probably have now wondered what this strange illustration on the left side of that screen is. It's simply the attempt to illustrate the software architecture of Amazon.com, of the Amazon.com website. And it's not the typical software architecture with boxes and arrows that you might be familiar with. It's just basically it looks like a chaos, right? You have a lot of points that somehow are interconnected. It's a globe. It's just super complex. And yes, the website is complex if you break down functionality and start to build up microservices. But this is handleable, this is manageable, and it actually allows lots of changes. Now, I will get to that in a second, but as a side comment, this picture is rather old. This is, I think, a good 10 years old. Today, Amazon.com is even much more complex as a website. So why is that so important? Why is it important to break down your architecture microservices? Now, just remember what I told you about two pizza teams. Everybody is a leader at Amazon, driving experiments quickly. This is exactly what enables the teams to act quickly, to take ownership. You don't have to care about as a software developer, I mean, or as a product owner. You don't have to care about the whole software system, and that would be a nightmare, because it would actually slow down all the innovation that you are driving. All of a sudden, you can assign people to individual components or services in your architecture, and you can have them own that and continue to develop that. And the only thing that they actually have to do is they have to make sure that they conform with the other services. As long as they continue to speak the same language, it's totally fine to change the business logic behind it and run the experiments that you actually want so much to improve the overall customer experience, right? So cloud computing, the AWS cloud, is actually built up of such microservices, which means that we basically give you as a builder all the tools that you need to actually build up your own software, and also break it down into microservices. You just use the underlying architecture, and here you go. It's basically like playing Lego and running experiments all the time. You don't like the roof? Okay, here you go. You change the roof. You don't like the entrance door of your house? Okay, here you go. You change it, right? You constantly play around and change your building until you like it, and your customers like it. Then the last pillar of our culture of innovation is the mechanisms. And technically speaking, a mechanism is simply a procedure that takes input and turns it into output. As we have already discussed at the beginning, we drive our innovation backwards from the customer. So we really put the customer in the focus of our thinking, and then from there we work backwards. We invent on behalf of our customers and develop the ideas that might lead to a more happy customer. And surprise, surprise, this is another another leadership principle within our DNA. It's really the customer obsession that drives us here. Just as a reminder, it's our thing, right? This may look a bit pathetic, but just from working with organizations and startups for years now, I just know that it is so easy to forget about the deeper meaning of the work that we do day in, day out. It's really all about making people happy, and that is what this image tries to visualize, right? And yes, there is an Amazon device back. It's an Echo device. If you manage to develop a product or a service that makes people smile, like this family here, then you are really up to something. Then people will like your product, and then they will start to use it, and that makes you then in turn happy also on the longer run, right? A few examples, we have discussed that in length already. That's the Amazon retail side. That's one of the things that we constantly improve. This is another product, I should say, that we invented. It's the Echo device. It was new because it was actually driven by the big hypothesis that there must be an alternative to using a keyboard or a mouse to interact with computers. The Echo device actually made using of computers accessible to people that didn't know anything of computers or simply could not use computers. And that's something that we also tend to forget here and there. Think of blind people, think of handicapped people, think of your own parents or grandparents. They are just not digital natives, but still they have needs that we want to address. So if we enable them to just talk to a computer, then that's super powerful, because talking to somebody is one of the first things that we learn when we after our birth, right? We start to interact with our environment, and language is just key for this interaction. Now, what is more obvious than actually enabling people to simply ask a question? Hey Alexa, what time is it? Hey Alexa, where's the next restaurant? And so forth. And talking of which, voice assistants, my impression is, and my assumption is, that we are just seeing the very first generation of voice assistants today. Yes, they are still relatively easy, but still already now super powerful. Think of a big city during the COVID-19 crisis that has to all of a sudden respond to many calls. This is where voice assistants can actually start to be super powerful. They can automate the typical conversations that you have. Do you have fever? Yes, no. Do you have any other symptoms? Yes, no. And then at the end of this relatively simple dialogue, you can actually point somebody to either the doctor or to a hospital, or simply relax him to, and that it is nothing to really worry about. This is really powerful, and this is not only powerful; it also helps cities and government today to quickly scale up to the needs that and just address the needs of the users, of many users at a time. Kindle, another example of the products that we have developed. I mean, here you can see a new generation. You see that it is just almost paper thin. This user here, he's standing on a balcony, he's using it in bright sunshine, just works pretty well. This is something that I typically like to highlight. A good year ago, I was in Seattle. Unfortunately, we don't have Amazon Go stores yet in Europe. And just in case you're not familiar with that, Amazon Go is a grocery shop. Yeah, it's a physical store. It is not an online store where you order your books or your grocery. You just enter a store. There's one key difference, however. You just enter the store. You pick the goods that you need. You put it into your shopping cart, and you leave without queuing up, without hassling with cash, credit cards, or whatsoever. You just leave, and just a few seconds after you have left, you will actually receive a message on your mobile phone, and this message will inform you that many thanks for your shopping. this is what your shopping has just costed you. This is a very unique experience, and if you think about the Corona crisis, I know that was not the original intent of Amazon Go. It was more for the people in urban environments that are having a pretty hectic daily life, and that just wanted to save money. Wanted to save time during their shopping experience. I personally find that Amazon Go would be super helpful here in Europe as well, especially now given the COVID-19 crisis, because then you could avoid queuing up and getting too close to people, right? And I know that a lot of the supermarkets, at least here in Germany, are actually facing that problem. How can we actually handle the number of people who enter the shop, and how can we maintain the necessary distance? This could be a very good solution. Now, technically speaking, an Amazon Go shop, in case you have wondered how the hell this works, is equipped with a lot of sensors. Of course, you get cameras in the roof that constantly screen what you are doing. They stream their recordings, their streams to our cloud, and then in turn in our cloud we have machine learning in place that is good at detecting what you are doing. If you have just put a bottle of milk into your basket, or if you have put it out and exchange it to something else, and then of course you get other web services that handle the shopping cart, the payment, the notification, and so forth. Now, these are our examples. This is what our culture of innovation produced. But I don't know. This is just our way of doing it. As I said at the beginning, I don't know what you will come up with. Is it a drone? Is it beaming? Yeah, I would love to have the Star Trek beaming. We just don't know. But rest assured that establishing such a culture of innovation in your own organization will help you tremendously to come up with ideas quickly and develop new products that actually excite and delight your end users and make you ultimately as an organization successful as well. As said. Now, I'm going to make a little break here. This was the first part, our culture of innovation. In the second part, we are going to cover we are going to dive deeper into working backwards, which is our innovation methodology. Having said that, see you in a bit. Welcome back to the second part of my talk, and today we are discussing how to innovate like Amazon. In the first part, we have basically captured the unique culture of innovation that we have established at Amazon. Now, in the second part, we are actually going to discuss our working backwards methodology, and that's the methodology that we use across the whole company to develop new products and services. So all the things that you might be familiar with, all the products and services, I mean, they actually go back to applying working backwards here internally. Now, working backwards is a methodology, and as I pointed out earlier, it really is driven from the user's needs and desires and pains. And ultimately, if you want to apply working backwards, it comes down to answering 5 guiding questions, and you see them here on the PowerPoint in the deck. The first question really is, who is your customer? And I know this question often sounds super simple to people, but as simple as it is, as tricky it can be to actually answer that question. And there are many, many organizations who start to think about products without actually making up their minds enough upfront. For who do I actually try to solve a problem here? Then the next question is, what is the customer problem or opportunity? Of course, you can say, hey, I'm going to solve something for students. Excuse me. I'm going to solve a problem for students. But what is the problem that these students have, right? What is the opportunity that we have? Is it maybe that they are attending lectures from home? Is it that they feel alone from home during social distancing? Is it simply that they need help during their studies? What is it? Now, typically, a group of users has many problems and many opportunities. A solution should focus to be clear and have a clear profile. So the next question is, what is the most important customer benefit that I actually want to address with my new service? And you may have realized until here, it's really all about clearly understanding for who do you want to do something, what is the opportunity. Now, there's a fourth question, and that is actually the foundation for the first three, and that is, how do you know what your customers need or want? This is the whole world of having data in place, data points in place that actually give you a good reason to tackle a problem. There's a lot of guessing, especially in the startup world. Hey, I like this technology, this could be something. Or I really would like to do something with machine learning. Why don't we try to find a case for that? No, doesn't work. Take your time, do market research. For example, do online research. Try to understand your target group. Clearly identify your target group. That's point number one. Understand how they live, what they need or what they want, and then also think about running interviews, right? Go out, talk to people, at least collect some data points, some anecdotes from the users. You don't have to go all in and do a full-fledged market research that is often very lengthy, very expensive, but at least spend some time on this question here. How do you need what the customer wants or needs? And then the last question that we actually have to answer is, what does the experience look like? How does the user, at a high level, how does the user experience your new product or new solution? Is it a mobile app? Is it a web application? What is the first thing that he does? What is the next thing? How do you interact? Is it voice assistance and so forth? These are the 5 working backwards questions that we apply in every before we actually start to any development, right? And these questions are actually the answering of these 5 questions are actually a process. You start with the customer. You answer these 5 questions, and then, only then, if you feel, hey, I know what I'm talking about, I have a clear idea of the needs and the user and so forth, then do you actually articulate your idea. And that is in the form of a press release. I'll get back to that in a bit. A list of frequently asked questions and, of course, corresponding answers, and visuals that help to visualize your idea. These press release, FAQ, and visuals is what we call working backwards artifacts. But again, it's a process, right? It's something that you only can start to document your idea and try to get buy-in from others. For example, venture capitalists, or from your boss, or from whoever. If you have answered the 5 questions, and then, of course, this approach of working backwards helps you to drive clarity, right? It helps you to really be clear about your idea before you describe your idea. And it's not a one-way door, so to say. It's not you start there and you end there and then you're done. No, it's much more complex than that, and you will need a lot of iterations to actually collect feedback for your idea, digest that feedback, approve your idea, and then go back, get another feedback. Is that what you meant? Is that now working for you? Yes, no, okay, here you go. Okay, here are the 5 working backwards questions. These are examples of the working backwards documents or artifacts, as I said earlier, and really think of it as documents that you produce. the press release. The press release is a narrative. It's a one-pager where you simulate basically the situation. I have developed my idea. I go to the markets, I go to the communications department and ask them to reach out to the public and tell the world what my idea is. And in this narrative, and it's a very structured narrative, it's a one-pager, you clearly have to describe what was the problem, what is the corresponding idea, what would a stakeholder say about it, how does a user experience my solution, what is the user saying about it, and of course, what is a call to action? For example, download my app in the App Store, or go to the websites XYZ to learn more about it, and so forth. That is a press release, and of course, it's not a real press release, right? We are not going to hand it over because we are only starting. We are at the conceptual phase of your idea. We are developing this idea. The whole meaning of a press release is to encapsulate and describe your idea so that you can share it with others and that they can in turn provide you feedback. Now, a press release, and that is now, right, that's the second document. A press release is only so and so long, right? It's a one-pager and there's only limited space to dive into details. That is why each press release has to have a corresponding FAQ, frequently asked questions. This is a document that can easily span over 5, 10, 20 pages, and that dives into the details and answers all the questions that people might come up during the development of your idea and your product concept, right? To give you a few examples, a customer may ask, how is it different? How is this new product different from something that I already have on the market? What is the data that do you keep track of any data, personal data? How much does it cost? Where can I download it? I don't like it anymore. Can I get rid of it? I don't understand how it works. Where can I get help? And so forth. There are a few standard questions that typically show up in every FAQ, but there's also a lot of specific questions that people ask for your specific idea. Then it's not only the customer who's going to ask you questions, also the stakeholders, both internally and externally, that might come up with questions. How did we come up to that idea? What alternatives did we evaluate? Why is it exactly that idea? What does this idea, if we implement or realize it, mean for other products? Does it eventually cannibalize a product that we are already having in place? Do we have a competitor out there who's working on something similar? How much will it cost me? Do we have the staff? Do we have the IT infrastructure? What if it fails as a product? Can we step back and so forth, right? You see, there's again a lot of questions, and my biggest advice to my first biggest advice here to you is really make sure that you capture all these questions, especially the hard ones, because the hard ones are those that can kill your neck during product development or after the launch, right? So just make sure that you cover the questions. You don't have to answer them immediately, but make sure that in your team there's somebody who takes care of capturing questions and making sure that they get answered. And then, as with the FAQ, make sure that you share the list of questions early, because other people will help you answer questions, and they will of course also have their own questions, so that you add even more questions. And as soon as you realize that somebody is asking a question that 2 or 3 other people have asked, you definitely should capture that question in your FAQ. Sorry. Now, that was the press release, a one-pager, a very well-structured description of your idea, the list of questions that come along that people will have on your idea, And then there's a third piece that we call visuals, and they yes, there are many different types of visuals. I'm referring to those that actually help to show the customer experience. And that could be simple sketches on posters, as you see on the picture here, which actually are super powerful. I know that from experience, and you probably too. If you just start to scribble something, all of a sudden it becomes clear to somebody who's sitting next to you, right? He all of a sudden gets it. You have wasted hundreds of words and it's still not clear. With this little sketch, you make your idea clear. You don't have to be shy. I know that many of us are not artists. I'm clearly not, but that is totally okay. It is not a competition of drawing beautiful sketches. It's really all about articulating idea and visualizing ideas so that others get it and so that you then in turn can get feedback. Start rough, because at the beginning your idea will be rough. Your press release is in its first version. You won't need a professional drawing, and then over time, when your idea improves and matures, then make sure that the quality of your visuals also increases. But at the beginning, again, it's totally okay to have super rough sketches. Right, and then the last point, and then I think we are going to summarize the overview. I'm going to summarize the overview of working backwards a little bit. This is not it, right? The first iteration is an attempt to articulate an idea. It's definitely not the end. What we do at Amazon so many times is we read, we discuss, we debate, and we ask questions. This is a typical. This is a photo of a typical doc read. That's what we do. We sit down with a team of people. We spend 1 hour together, and it's not that we send an email to the others that we have asked feedback for. We don't do that. Instead, we actually ask them simply to spend time with us. And yes, that time is valuable. So we definitely thank them for taking the time. And then we spend that hour with them. In the first 15 minutes, 10-15 minutes, we just ask them to read our press release and our FAQs and have a look at the visual. That is all. So, and why is that? Because we can rest assured that after the 15 minutes, the idea, the document has been read, and the idea is super fresh in their mind. And then just by reading, they will have all these questions. I don't get the idea. Can you please explain? What do you mean with that? No, I disagree with that. I know that there is something already out, and so forth. And then you get all the comments and remarks and questions that are so valuable for further developing your idea. So if you think that you develop an idea and you're done after the first iteration, just plan time for iterations. Live with the iterations. Don't take it serious if people challenge your ideas. It should always be in a humble and fair way, but embrace the fact that people have different thoughts, because that is ultimately something that you will face anyhow when you launch your product. And then be prepared that you will need a couple of iterations before your idea is mature. 1-2 iterations is nothing. You can have for bigger products, you can easily have dozens of iterations before the idea is mature enough. And that is also because you will ask for feedback in growing circles. You will start with maybe your closest teammates, and then if you have a good and warm feeling there, you ask people from another department. You climb up the ladder in your organization. You ask the first leaders and so forth. So it just takes time, and take that as a good thing, because whatever the time you spend at the beginning is super valuable and saves you even more time if you don't do it at the beginning, and if you find out at the later stage that you have followed the wrong path. And that question, believe it or not, is something that we get quite a lot at Amazon too. And I thought it is interesting for you that I share a short video clip with you. I hope the audio quality is good enough. It's actually from one of our annual gatherings within Amazon, where one of our colleagues actually reached out to Jeff Bezos with the question, is working backwards optional, right? Let's have a
is the working backwards process optional? It sounds great, but it seems like a lot of work. Oh boy, how do we begin? Well, the working backwards process should not be optional unless you know a better way. And you shouldn't know a better way until you've tried the working backwards process several times. The working backwards process really does work. And this particular thing here, it sounds great, but it seems like a lot of work. Done correctly, the working backwards process is a huge amount of work, but it saves you even more work later. The working backwards process is not designed to be easy. It's designed to save huge amounts of work on the back end and to make sure that we're actually building the right thing. What so many companies do is they write the software. That's a lot of work. They get it all working, and then they throw it over the wall of the marketing department and say, okay, here's what we built. Write the press release for it. That process is the one that's actually backwards.
Yeah, I still love it. I've seen it dozens of times and I still love it. It's so I hope that you could get it. Just in case you couldn't, one of my colleagues actually asked, is the working backwards process optional? And the simple answer is no, it is not. And it's not, it is a lot of work, yes. And it's actually not designed to be easy. It's designed to drive good results, and it will, done correctly, it will save you even more time afterwards. If you turn that around, you basically take a big risk. Good. So let's start with the customer. Let's go one level down now. That's the first question, right? Who is our customer? And that's another leadership principle. That's something that we have already discussed during the culture of innovation at Amazon. And that's one of our leadership principles. Really dive deep and understand the situation before you actually take decisions. Now, who is the customer is a question that might sound easy, but is often difficult to answer. And I typically do an exercise with the customers before we as a warm-up, basically. If you take a look at these three images, you see very, very different situations. And this little exercise is supposed to help people understand that they have to be specific when they talk about a customer. The context of the customer and the needs. Just for the sake of the exercise here, if you take a look at the women at the top left corner, she's relatively young, I would say. She is looks like she's sitting in public transport. She has she's listening to music, I would say. She looks pretty relaxed. She is not really busy doing something, and she's on her way from A to B. So she has some time to simply relax, right? Then if you turn to the second picture, here you see a young man, I would say, who's standing in front of a parking machine. He doesn't look relaxed at all, right? He is super annoyed. I think we all know that situation. We actually would have to ask him what the situation was, but my best bet is he probably doesn't have the necessary coins to pay the parking machine, or the parking machine doesn't work, or it did not work and now he got punished, something like that, right? He's definitely not happy. It's not a happy customer. So in the place of the responsible municipality, the city, I would take that situation seriously if we are driving for happy citizens, right? And that is something that we should do. Now, let's have a look at the third picture at the bottom. This is a more senior guy. He looks pretty experienced to me. He is very focused. He doesn't, well, at least no, to me, I get different answers if I share that with other people. To me, he doesn't look stressed. it's more that he is focused, right? One thing that we clearly can state here is that he is consuming and digesting a lot of information. He's sitting in front of, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screens. That is a lot of information. And what he sees per screen is also complex on top. To me, it looks a bit like a traffic system. I think that he's doing some work in traffic or utilities, maybe. Water supply could be it. And it's a monitoring system, I would say, because you get all these traffic lights, right? A lot of the things are green, but there's also something on in yellow and in red, which typically indicates there's a warning or there's an error going on. Now, another interesting observation in this last picture is he's interacting with the mouse. So he is actually doing something, which leads me to the assumption, and it's an assumption, that he is overwriting what the system is doing, or he's asking for more information, something like this. And what we also can see, and maybe that has slipped, is the fact that he is not only working with the computers, he's also working with paper. He has a bunch of paper in his front. His left hand is lying on the paper, so they seem to be important. He's also using a number of pens, so he must be super busy, and he's actually constantly challenged, engaged. I would say, at least, but definitely very, very likely also challenged. And to conclude, I think he has a lot of responsibility. So that is the level of detail that you have to go down to. Just a little exercise. Let me give you another exercise. This is a custom example, Maria Garcia. This is what you would typically get as an answer if you would do a customer interview, right? Remember the second, one of the working backwards questions that we discussed. How do you know what is going on with people? How do you know how they feel, and how? And then take based on their answers, you have to read in between lines. Now, in this case, it's pretty straightforward. Basically, Maria Garcia is a mom. She's a working mother. She has 3 kids and a full-time job. Now, I think everybody of us knows what that means. She's a nurse on top, which probably means that she has to work in shifts. And of course, she not only works, but she also has to take care of her kids. She has a responsibility for school, for cooking, for laundry, for shopping. And of course, she also wants to have what we call quality time these days. I mean, ultimately, she's not a machine. She's also a human being and a mother. So she wants to have spend some nice time with her family and friends, and just for herself maybe. That is what a customer will tell you. If you ask him, so how are you doing? Tell me about your life. This is what you would typically get. And that is so important. And these are the insights that you can collect either by just observing or by interviewing people, by running online researches. And these insights ultimately tell you what are the actual needs, what are the attitudes, what are the behaviors of the users that you are trying to address. There are a couple of techniques that you can use to actually improve your understanding of your users. These are 2 examples that are fairly common. I guess that most of you are familiar with what is called empathy map. That is on the left side. An empathy map basically is a description of a target group. You pick a person that is representative for your target group. You give that person a name, maybe an age. You can use a photo, and that helps you to relate to that person. And all of a sudden, it's much easier to think about the life of that person. What are the tasks? What are the things that they do day in, day out? A student goes to university. He has to learn, right? That's obvious. But what else? Maybe they have to earn money for their livings. Maybe they have to commute to the university. Maybe they have I don't know, maybe they are a coach, they help others to learn, maybe they have hobbies, right? These are all tasks. The tasks are what we do, but they don't really describe how we feel about it. And customer satisfaction is a lot about feelings. So it's really, really good to understand what people feel when they do something. Stress, anger, responsibility, the need for confirmation, the desire for confirmation, these are really feelings. And as a human being, we are all driven by feelings. So it's really also important to understand how people feel when they do what they do. Now, we are not individuals. We are underlying a lot of influences. And that is another thing that you want to capture in your empathy map. What are the influences? What are influences, for example, for students? Well, again, an obvious one are the friends, the mates at university. They help each other, they support each other, they spend time together. It's the professors that give the classes, that actually give the credits at the end of the semester. It could be the family, it could be social media. I don't know. Just go through your end user and think about what are the key influences that somehow have impact on my end users. And then if you understand what they do, how they feel, and what influences them, you can start to think about what are the pain points. And in the case of Maria Garcia, it's pretty obvious, and she was actually very explicit about that. Let's go back for it. She actually says that at the beginning, in the very first sentence, free time is my ultimate luxury. That is a very clear statement, right? So her pain point number one is time, simply time. And there might be others, right? So time, if this example was about Maria Garcia, you would write down time. Maybe and then the overall goal is actually what is ultimately what that person wants to achieve, right? And here we would say, okay, I think that saving that person time is really the one thing that would be super beneficial. So let's focus on that. How can we save time? And that then in turn becomes your challenge statement. The challenge statement in turn is we will see that in a second, is the one thing that helps you stay focused. This is the problem that you are focusing on. You're not focusing 3 or 4 or 5 different problems. They don't change. You did your research, you understand your users, you understand what their problems are. This is the problem / opportunity, because every problem is an opportunity, of course, right? Now, to turn to the right side, there's another example of a way to really relate with your end users, and that's the customer journey. Now, the customer journey is an interesting one. And I think the customer journey could be super helpful for Maria Garcia. What does it do? It actually describes the day of a person. How does Maria Garcia, in this example, how does she get up, and when does she get up in the morning? What is the next step? She goes to the bathroom. She gets dressed. She prepares the breakfast. She has breakfast. She gets her children to school. Then she continues to work. She does a number of things at work. She has a break in between. At the end, she comes back home. She does the laundry. She cooks. She does homework with the children. All these are little steps in her daily journey, if you will, and that really helps you understand what people are busy with. And you may have guessed it already, but in the case of Maria Garcia, shopping might be a very good opportunity to save her so valuable time that she could much better spend with doing homework with her children, or just enjoying time with her children or her family, or just having half an hour per day to relax instead of queuing up in a supermarket. So 2 different techniques. We typically do at least the empathy map, so the one on the left side. This is an example. I wouldn't say that it is a perfect example, but it is an example. It's actually the result of a challenge that I did in Berlin. The background of that challenge that we have been working on with Deutsche Welle, that's the German international broadcaster, was there's a lot of disinformation in social media, and we know that, right? It's intentional or unintentional disinformation, and journalists, of course, they know how to handle with that. They have a very good sense for information. They know that they have to evaluate the source of information. They know that they can take conclusions from the tonality of information and so forth. And they are simply informed people. But what about teenagers? And that was exactly the challenge that Deutsche Welle came up with. They approached us saying, hey, there's a lot of disinformation in social media, and we really care about teenagers. What can we do? How can we apply technology to improve the use of social media? And this is the empathy map that we have developed to just understand a teenager. And you see that we have given the teenager name. It's Sarah, 14 years old, and yes, it's coincidentally my daughter. Surprise, surprise. It just helped me relate much better. And then we went through the different segments of the empathy map, and we identified a lot of things that we felt were relevant for the challenge. And in red, you see the highlights of those things that we felt were the most important. For example, social media, yes, that plays a key role, of course. Celebrities, influencers, yes, 14 teenagers are very much influenced by influencers or celebrities. They play a key role. They have the friends, the media. So whatever we have to come up with, we thought at that time, after having developed that empathy map, it has to somehow make use of social media, and it has to be embedded. It doesn't make sense to come up, for example, with a on-site class that they have to attend, where they spend 2 hours getting boring lectures on disinformation in social media. No. For teenagers, you have to embed your idea into their world, meaning that you have to play the game in social media with influencers and virtual friends. Actually pretty straightforward, but it just becomes so obvious when you develop these empathy maps and really start to relate with your users. Now, I typically would run a first exercise. Unfortunately, this is not a workshop, it's more a lecture or a presentation from my side. You will get you will be able to have a look at a little booklet that we are going to share over the website of the hackathon. And that booklet actually is relatively small, but captures the key ideas of working backwards. My recommendation here is, if you start to work on your ideas during the hackathon, just take that booklet, try to remember what I've explained to you about the innovation process, and then just work yourself through the 5 questions. You will get some instructions in the booklet, some inspiration too, and try to apply it. And I hope that when applying it, it will start to make a lot of sense to you. So the reason I'm mentioning this here is that, yes, no, we don't do the exercise, but yes, you get a hint here in that case. If you want to work on this question, who is your customer, then have a look at that booklet on page 5. Okay, empathy map, we did that. Now, if we have done the empathy map, the next thing is to articulate the challenge, right? What is the problem? And we typically use this syntax here. Today, a customer has a problem or an opportunity when being in a certain situation. That is how we describe a problem/opportunity. Let's try that for Maria Garcia. a first attempt could be today, Maria has to sacrifice 2.5 hours per week away from family or work, planning and purchasing her grocery shop, her grocery, right? 2.5 hours. And that is something that we know because we have done a good job collecting data points. We have talked to Maria and we have gathered information from more people, so we know what is going on with them. Now, Maria is, of course, only a representative of that target group, so we can start to actually go to a higher level to make it a bit more abstract and could translate it into something like today, single working mothers have to sacrifice 3 to 4 hours away from family or work doing her grocery. And that is already a bit more abstract. And all of a sudden, you are not talking about an individual, but you are talking about a whole target group. Here, single working mothers. That is in turn the starting point for your ideation. Before you don't understand the problem, it doesn't make sense to develop ideas, right? Because that is only guessing, and you don't know if that is actually addressing a problem. Again, a little hint in the booklet, you will find on page number 9 more information about how you articulate your customer problem. If you do that for the hackathon or for any other project that you are going to work on, try to be precise. A customer problem, an opportunity is exactly one sentence. It's not a chapter, it's just boil it down to one clear, human readable sentence. Discuss that with your buddies, with your teammates, and make sure that you are all on the same page, because the problem statement will be your mission. It will give you direction for the remaining hackathon or for the remaining time of your whole project. This is what everybody in the team is going to work on. So that has to be clear. Otherwise, you get somebody working on this and somebody working on that, and it gets disconnected, and then the whole team will lose power and ultimately won't be able to deliver, of course. And take your time. This is really a key step. Make sure that everybody in your team agrees that this is really the problem and opportunity. Typically, if you do a good job here, spend time with your customer. Make sure that you loop back to somebody who's actually suffering from that problem. Make sure that you talk to Maria, for example, and ask her, hey, this is what I've understood. Is this what you're actually talking about? Does that make sense to you as a problem? And would it help if we would tackle that problem described in this problem statement? Now, so far, we have built up an understanding of the problem. The next step is, of course, that we develop an idea. And typically, what we see is that many people have many ideas, pre-cooked ideas in their mind. Maybe that they have more ideas during the first part of the work that we just discussed. But definitely, it's now the time to surface these ideas, clearly articulate these ideas, and work on them. Another leadership principle here is think big. That is one of our leadership principles at Amazon. When you work on an idea, don't think small, because that is going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. You want to have a bold direction for something. And yes, of course, over time, your idea will be cooked down because you have to deal with boundary conditions. There's only limited time, limited money, and so forth. But the idea itself has to be big. And if you're developing a big idea, then you get the chance that it's not only a first iteration of the product, but that it is more a bold idea that supports many iterations and an expansion of the of your product idea over time. There's a technique that we use, and that's the next exercise that we typically would do in a workshop, and that is what we call Crazy 8. What is that? Crazy 8 means that we actually develop one idea per minute over 8 minutes. So there's somebody, the moderator, typically me, who would sit there with a watch and he would stop a minute. During this minute, everybody in the team takes the chance to write down exactly one idea on a post-it, right? It's just one idea on a post-it, one. Just a few keywords to make the idea clear enough, maybe a little scribble to visualize that idea, no more. One idea per minute. Now, after that minute, you put that post-it on your side, you take the next post-it, and of course it could be virtual post-its, you write down the next idea. Third minute, next idea, done, and so forth. Typically, what people will find out during this exercise is that it is super easy to write down the first 2-3 ideas. And that is what they already had in mind anyhow, even without thinking about the customer. But then, in minute 4 or 5, it becomes increasingly difficult for people to develop ideas. And that is exactly the moment where they have to reflect, okay, hey, hold on, I'm running out of ideas. What did the customer tell me? What was that? Okay, yeah, true. That might be an option. We had that customer journey. That might be an option. What are others already doing, and so forth. So they really start to go back to the work that they have done before, the work that they have developed before, and they also start to think bigger. That is where you typically get the crazy ideas and capture crazy ideas. There's nothing like a silly idea. Just write it down, capture the idea, put it aside, and collect the next idea. That is the first step of that's the step of generating ideas. Now, you can use tools for that. I know that during COVID-19, it's difficult to actually physically meet with each other. That's one of the rare exceptions where I actually would tend to be in one room with everybody, because it's just so much clearer and interactive to stand in front of a whiteboard and stick all the post-its on the wall and work with the post-its. But of course, there are tools to support that in a remote environment. There's, for example, the conceptboard.com. That's one of the tools that I have people seen using. And there's Miro.com. That's another tool that also works pretty nice. Ultimately, the tools are not that important. Just make sure that you can share, and I'm talking about a virtual environment now. Just make sure that you can share your idea, that you can capture your ideas, that you can share ideas, that you can vote on ideas, because that's the next step then. Now, so far we have done the crazy 8, right? We have captured 8 ideas per person, hopefully 8. Sometimes it's only 6, but that's also okay. It's 6 ideas, it's already a lot. Now what we do next is we stick all the post-its on the wall and we discuss the ideas. Everybody gets a chance to speak and explain his ideas. And then, of course, you will see repetitions. And that means that we will start to build on others' ideas. And so, for example, somebody says, I have been thinking about a portal. And then somebody says, yeah, I have the same idea here. And then you simply stack the post-its, or if it is somehow related, you just stick it close to each other so that you know this is a group of ideas that somehow conceptually belong to each other. There are no bad ideas, right? It's not the time to start discussions. You just give everybody a chance to express his ideas. And yes, every team has people that are a bit more open, a bit more vocal. But as a moderator, and I would suggest that you have a moderator for these exercises in your team, as a moderator, you should just make sure that you cut off people who start to discuss about ideas, that start to make ideas bad, challenge ideas. No, this is not the time. Everybody gets the time to discuss. And why? Because in every idea is something of the truth. And you probably know that saying in your language. Okay, then we have a wall full of ideas. And that is a good point in time to take a photo, because this is intellectual work that you have done so far. There's a lot of creativity that you just have captured on the wall. So take a photo, make sure that you have nicely documented that, so that you can go back to the ideas at a later stage. And why is it so important? remember that we have discussing the beauty of experimenting, but we don't have a guarantee that an experiment is actually going to work out. We may find out weeks, months later that an idea just did not work. But we have all these beautiful ideas out there. Why not just go back and take the second most promising idea and start to work on that, right? But so that's I'm leaping into future now myself. You capture your idea, you capture the ideas, you discuss the ideas, and now it's time to actually discuss the ideas. And this is the time for disagreeing and committing, which is another leadership principle, right? How does that work? We typically use red stickers. Each person gets 3 votes, hence 3 red stickers, little red dots, that he can stick on the ideas he likes the most. Yeah, pick the ideas that you felt satisfied and stated the need the best, and that those that truly delight the customers. Remember, we want to delight customers. We want to address needs of the customers. So go back there, because that is typically one of the first points where people start to deviate. I have an idea, but does it actually address the problem that we were talking about and that we have identified for ourselves? So you stick your red stickers, you give your votes, you vote, and then for the moderator, it's actually pretty straightforward. You simply count the number of red stickers in your group, in your team. Maybe you are working with 5, 6 people in that group, and what you typically would see is that there are 3 hot candidates, and that often there is a clear winner. If not, then you need another round of voting. You just let people vote again for the 3 most promising stickers, and then you always have the one big idea, right? And that is a pretty compact exercise. Typically, this takes around about an hour, 1.5 hours, and then the idea that you want to work from now on is there. And even better, you have a lot of ideas. So, and that's one of the beauties that I like about this this Crazy 8 approach, that it really helps you generate quickly, that you helps quickly generate good ideas, and that it helps you to pick a good idea. Now, if your idea is there, make sure that you capture that idea. Just write it down. The big idea is, and then corresponding, the most important customer benefit that we want to tackle is. Just write it down again. That is the mission that you're going to work on. Now, we understand the customer. We have an idea. The next step is the visualization, right? And that's the 5th question. What is the customer experience look like? You see a little scribble here. It's like a comic strip, and we all know the beauty of comics. You just see a few pictures, and all of a sudden your head starts to work. Your brain starts to imagine a story behind that. That is the beauty of visuals. As I said, start out with hand-drawn visuals. Don't be shy. Definitely don't build a prototype if you're still iterating on the idea. Spend time describing your idea, and drafting the visuals, getting feedback, and only then start to prototype. Get design involved early. Yeah, I personally find that designers are still, unfortunately, often totally underestimated. Yes, we need software developers to develop a software. But we also need designers who really, really can build up a user experience that makes sense to people. If you have the best software on earth, if it is just a crappy user experience, people won't like it. So don't underestimate it. And I'm not only talking about the color of a button or the position of a text. I'm talking about the overall user experience, not only the user interface. And then when you create your storyboard, your visuals, start with the most important scenario, your best customers. Here you see an example storyboard. That is another example that we have been working on in California, actually. In this example, we have been working on a challenge that we got from San Luis Obispo Police Department. They approached us asking for help with collecting digital evidences. What they found is that a lot of officers actually showed up at crime scenes, and that they knew that digital evidences like mails, photos, social media streams, and so forth could clearly play a role to help understand what was going on there, but they just did not know and did not understand all the digital tools that we have today. So they were asking, how can we actually collect digital evidences in a way that supports the officers who actually have to do that day in, day out. As you can see, the storyboard, just from a conceptual point of view here, and forget about the concrete challenge for a moment. The storyboard starts with a problem. There's a user who has a problem in a situation. In this case, the officer is arriving at a crime scene and just doesn't know how to collect the evidences. And then you take the police officer through his user experience. She remembers that that there is a new app out there that has been made available to help them exactly with that situation. So she installs she pulls up her smartphone. She starts to use it. She gets some instructions from the app on how to collect an email. She does that. The email gets uploaded to a server in a way that it actually can be used at court. And then, of course, and that's where the story here ends. At court, the email can be used to actually show that somebody is guilty for trafficking drugs. In that example, that is the story that you explain, that you tell. There are tools again. As said, I would recommend that you use hand drawings at the beginning, because otherwise you get lost in tools easily. But in case you want to use a tool, there's one that I found pretty helpful. It's called storyboardthat.com. It's template based. So as you can see from the screenshot, you get a lot of templates. For example, for end users, you get young people, you get old people, you get different scenarios, you get shapes, you get texts, textables, infographics, and so forth. So ultimately, you just plug and drag and drop the templates to tell your story here. Sketching a story should actually be easy. I mean, 5 minutes is just for the sake of getting an understanding, but I would say that within half an hour in your team, you should be able to clearly identify the 4-6 situations, pictures that clearly describe your user experience. Again, start rough, and as long as your idea is rough, remain rough until it becomes more mature, until you have digested feedback, and then of course you can spend more time on that as well. But don't waste your time on beautifying storyboards here. Now, we are now at the point that we have fully answered the 5 working backwards questions. We know how the customer is. We now know what his problems and pains are. We know what the opportunity is. We have collected data to actually ground our product idea, and we have done an attempt to clearly describe our idea and the customer journey and the customer experience. This is what we need, and because we have answered the 5 working backwards questions, we can now go ahead, remember the process that I have explained earlier, and start to describe our idea so that others can actually have a look at it and give feedback and understand our idea. And that is where we start to create our working backwards documents, press release and FAQ. The press release, just as an overview, the press release is a leap into the future. It's a think big thing, right? It is really, we envision that we are now in summer 2021 and our big idea goes live. That is what the press release describes. It clearly describes on the customer needs. It is not jargon. It's not to sell ideas. It's just to describe ideas, and that is a huge difference. If you have to sell your idea at that stage, there's something wrong, because you're still developing your idea, and the idea itself should be self-speaking. So try to avoid any language that tries to make the problem bigger or makes the solution better than it is actually. Just describe it in a very neutral way, and say it simply and clearly so that it is also easy for people to understand your idea. Talking of which, saying it simple or not, this is an example that we typically would read out. If you take a second to understand that sentence, it's probably not meaning a lot to you. I know what it means, but I'm still struggling with getting it from that. If you translate that to a simplified version, then all of a sudden the idea becomes much bigger. In this example here, it's all about international shoppers who want to decide what to purchase, and they want to, of course, understand the total costs of an item. And the total costs for international shoppers normally include things like taxes, duties, and shipping costs. And the whole idea is that a service, a product, a feature makes it very clear what the total costs for an international shopper is. That is what they say here. From a language point of view, just by breaking down into multiple sentences using simple language makes it much easier for people to understand your idea. So please keep that in mind. I know it sounds a bit like it's being at school again here, but ultimately what you do is you hand over a sheet of paper so that others can understand your idea. If you're failing there because you're not clear enough, then ultimately they won't buy in, and that is not what you want, right? You want people to understand your idea and provide feedback, and hopefully like your idea too. Now, a press release is a narrative. It's a one-pager, but it's not random text. It's actually pretty much the opposite. A press release is a well-structured document where each paragraph of the press release corresponds to what I would call here a piece of information. For example, there's a paragraph that is dedicated to the opportunity and the problem. Remember, that is one of the working backwards questions that we discussed earlier. Actually, two: who and what is the problem? Who is our user and what is his problem, right? And then there's a paragraph that actually talks about the customer experience. Well, surprise, surprise, that is the fifth question, and we have already been working on that because we have been drafting a storyboard. So here in that paragraph, you basically described that idea and that customer experience. And there are, of course, other paragraphs or elements in that press release that we are going to capture in a bit. The booklet actually describes all the elements of a press release. You can see them all here. We start, of course, with the title, with a headline and a byline, which really briefly summarizes the idea, what is all about. Then we have the opportunity, the problem statement, and then of course the description of our idea, our big idea. And then we also have two quotes. One leader quote: what would, for example, Deutsche Welle say about a solution that we have implemented for the situation, for the challenge around disinformation in social media? Then you get customer experience, and then you get a second quote. That is what a teenager would actually say, right? And the quotes, talking of language again, the quotes are of course human readable. It's not marketing speech, it's actually what people would say about your solution. And that's the only part where you can deviate a bit from the neutral language. People are emotional, and here you can actually use some emotional language as well. And we stop a press release with a call to action, which is also, of course, super important. And I pointed that out a bit earlier already. What is the call to action? Do you want the reader to actually go to an app store? Do you want him to go to a website? He likes your idea now after having read the press release. What is the next step? You have to tell them, right? Otherwise, it's just wasted time in a way. Okay, let's focus on 3 elements: the headline, the byline, the summary, and the customer quote. And let's start with the customer quote, because the customer quote ultimately is super powerful to explain your idea. Ultimately, we are trying to delight customers. Now, if a customer is happy, if a customer is giving a quote and makes that explicit, then that's super helpful for you. Of course, customer quotes at that stage are made up because we don't have the solution or the product in place yet. But they should be specific, they should be believable. This is something what an actual person would say, and it should sound like something that a human said. It's actually a testimonial. You know all the testimonials from websites where they sell products to reinforce why the customer actually cares about what you are launching. That's the whole purpose of a customer quote. And we now here have an example of a customer quote. Just to briefly give you the context, Amazon Campus is a product that we have launched in the US. Just imagine that you are living on a campus as a student and you have your dorms, but you don't have an address. So the big question is, if you order a book and students order a lot of books, they need a lot of books for their studies. Where do these books get shipped to, right? And the idea here is that Amazon Campus creates a place that books or any other goods can be shipped to. That's the whole idea. And now we are talking about a customer quote. So we are reading, we are writing down what a student might say about our idea. Getting my textbooks was way easier this year. So there's obviously a benefit. Instead of making the trip, blah, 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 I simply went to ultimately get my book. Now, who am I? What was my problem so far? And how does the new solution help me? This is actually the key of what the customer quote is all about. And it's not just it's not that we are writing in the press release, set a student from, I don't know, Munich University of Applied Sciences or whatever. It's actually Gloria Min. It's a very clear person. And that goes again back to our empathy map where we gave our end users a name. So just reuse that here. Be specific. Try it out a couple of times. I know writing can be hard, but it's really, really super helpful if you take your time and be super crisp about what the customer quote would look like. Now, the next element that we are going to discuss here in that talk are headline, byline, and summary. The headline is simply the title, right? It's a short, compelling description. The byline is 1-2 sentences describing what you are launching and what the most relevant customer benefit will be. And then the summary and the date is a brief paragraph that explains that once again, but in a very concise way. And why is that so important? Why is it important to have that structure and start with these elements? Because from a psychological point of view, people will start to read at the top. They will start to read your press release, and you get a very short window of attention if they don't like what you're writing at the top of your narrative, of your press release, you will probably or eventually lose them. So you have to do a really, really, really good job at being super clear about it in your title, byline, and summary. Example of a heading: Amazon Campus, that's the example we discussed earlier, launches first multi-channel student store at the University of California, Berkeley. Now that's actually a complete sentence. It's relatively long. It doesn't have to be that long. What I like about it is that it is explicit about who is launching something. It is explicit about what gets launched and where it gets launched. I mean, where, University of Berkeley, California, Berkeley, that is maybe a bit specific. You could also shorten it in a bit and say Amazon Campus launches first multi-channel store, student store. Stop, right? That would be a bit shorter. It would be less specific, but also clearly work. Now, then we get the next part. Seattle Business Wire, August 31st, 2014. And you might think that they are random. They're actually not. The date, for example, is a date that could be realistic. I mean, you haven't done product planning, so you don't know, but at least you can aim for the launch of a product. Say we start to work on something today and we are targeting to launch something for the next summer break. We know exactly that here we should use, I don't know, July 15th, 2021. And that already gives some indication and gives you a good idea of the timeline, just the timeline, just that little date. Then we have the summary. Since returning to school for the fall semester, Berkeley students have experienced a fresh take on the cottage bookstore, blah, blah, blah. Super crisp, super clear what the benefit is, and it also attracts interest, at least I find. So what we want to do is we want to continue reading to really understand what that offering is. But just in case somebody stops reading here, you can also say, hey, okay, at least he knows that there is a multi-channel student store, and berkeley.amazon.com is obviously the URL that I should fire up to learn more about it, right? That's the power of starting very clear and making something attractive to the reader. Now, this is another exercise that you can do. Actually, I would recommend doing it in this order. And the booklet again gives you some help. Just have a look at page 23 here. FAQs. Yeah. I cannot emphasize enough how important FAQs are. You have seen what a press release is. It is good, it is well structured, it corresponds to the 5 working backwards questions, but there are so many more questions that arise during the development of your idea and your product that need to be captured. All the little discussions that you have in your with your team, day in, day out, all the little decisions that you take, capture them. That's exactly why you have an FAQ. My recommendation would actually be have somebody who is the owner of the FAQs, who just is responsible for maintaining a list of the questions and who makes sure, maybe himself or maybe somebody, or most likely somebody else too, that these questions get answered before you actually take the final go, no-go decision for your product. Because otherwise you simply don't have a complete picture. And you forget all this little information, all the little decisions that you take in between, all the discussions that you have had. They are just important. As I said, there are 2 sets of questions that you want to capture. There are the questions from your actual end users or customers. How does it work? How do I get started? Where do I get started? How is it different from something that I already use today? Maybe from a competitor, maybe from me. How much does it cost? Do I have to pay at all? What type of support can I expect? What if I change my mind and I don't want to use it any longer? how you are asking me for personal information? How are you going to use that? Are you in line with data privacy regulations, GDPR here for us? Where can I learn more? I just don't. It sounds interesting, but I just don't want to download and install that app. I just simply want to learn more. Do you, for example, have tutorials online? Do you have little videos that give me an impression of a solution? What are others saying about that solution, and so forth? So that's the whole range of questions that you get from customers when they are confronted with the idea. And then the other set of questions that you have to capture and have to answer are the questions from your stakeholders. What is the idea vision? It's totally okay to repeat questions. If you hear them a lot, repeat them. That's totally okay. What customer problems are we solving? Why now? And why now implicitly means, can it be postponed to a later stage? Because typically stakeholders have many activity streams going on, so they want to understand, is this urgent or not? And then vice versa, how can we launch this more quickly? Have we thought about variations of the same product? Is there a possibility to be quicker, to have a shorter time to market here? How do we know what the customers wanted? How does this product actually support our goals? Don't get confused. Of course, you have identified a customer problem, but typically from a broader company point of view or organization point of view, there are many activities going on, and that is a fair question. How does it support our broader mission or vision? Does it have priority, or is it maybe something that we can do later or just skip at all? And then vice versa, how does it help us? Why us? Does it help us leverage our flywheel? In other words, how does it help us scale up and have more impact in the market for our citizens, for our patients in the hospitals, for our readers of social media, and so forth? Did we consider other options? Remember, we had this whiteboard with all the ideas of the that we developed during Crazy 8. What is the underlying technology? What is the impact on current systems? Does it actually mean that we have to deprecate other systems that we are already using? Do we have the infrastructure to run that application? Do we need to train staff? Do we need to hire more staff? Is there revenue stream? What is cost structure for that application, just for building, but also for maintaining what is the product lifecycle? Do we already envision other versions, next versions, right? What is the product roadmap, in other words? A lot of questions. Take your time, capture these questions, and write them down in your FAQs. A few tips here as well for writing FAQs. As said, FAQs can be several pages long, can also be super detailed. It's totally okay to have a cost calculation in your FAQ, for example. Gather new questions as you review your press releases and FAQs. I mean, that's why you do it. You get the questions during the discussions. Answer critical questions early, I would say, in my own words, because that helps you uncover risks and help assess feasibility and complexity. Don't leave difficult questions, the answering of difficult questions till the end, because that could be just a neck breaker, basically. And then definitely, if you receive a question more than once, add it to your FAQ. Again, an exercise. I would recommend that you separate the documents. You have one document for your storyboard, one document for your press release, and then one document for customer FAQs and one document for stakeholder FAQs. So separate that. And then we are done. No, we are not. We are not done. We have now understood a problem, identified an opportunity. We have developed a product idea. We know what the customer experience is, and we have described all of that, and we have circulated that. But there is a lot of discussion that we need, and that will go on. So go out, discuss your idea, share your press release, share your FAQs, share your storyboard and other visuals and seek to get diverse perspectives and work to disconfirm other people's beliefs, right? When reviewing a working backwards document, press releases are designed to generate conversation. Don't stop conversations. Don't get mad if people start conversations and deviate from your original idea. That's actually why you do it. You want them to contribute their thoughts. That is actually why they spend some time with you. And if you have done a doc read, if you have received feedback, iterate over your press release. Just create a second version. Digest all the input that you have received, so that the idea ultimately becomes clearer, and the idea and that the document becomes clearer and the idea stronger. And don't forget and remember to push yourselves to invent on behalf of the customers, because that was our starting point. There are a few do's and don'ts as well. Respectfully challenge yourself. And especially during the first iterations, don't nitpick on the document. Stick on a high level. Focus on the broad idea and not on the tiny details. That doesn't make sense. Also, ask yourself: Did you think big enough? Is the idea really big enough? And of course, did you answer the 5 working backwards questions clearly enough? And with that, I'm happy to end my talk. You now have received a good impression of what our culture of innovation at Amazon is. We discussed the actual culture, the way we organize our people, how we empower them. We discussed a little bit the meaning of technology and software architectures, modern software architectures for driving innovation. And we also especially discussed working backwards as a mechanism to develop ideas that actually have a very good chance to fulfill a customer need and delight your customers, which ultimately will mean for you that your customer succeeds, and with your products succeed, and with your products, your organization, your team as well. I wish I could be with you on the online hackathon. Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend, but I really cross fingers for you, and hope that you are going to develop great ideas. The working backwards, this lecture is, in a way, it is my product. It's what I try to share with you. If you take a moment to share your thoughts, that would be super helpful for me. You see a little code here where you can just provide some feedback to me, things you liked or you disliked. And having said that, yes, it's a virtual world these days, but I definitely thank you for taking some time with me today on the topic how to innovate like Amazon. And if you want, you can reach me under this email address. You will also find me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with you there. And with that, good luck for the hackathon, and I'm looking forward to excellent results. Thank you.